And then let me check that it's working. Just a minute to kick in. Okay.
Hi there.
We are on.
You're on the internet?
Yes.
Okay.
Catherine's pulling up the slides. Okay, welcome everyone. This is a virtual meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Group. A continuation of our meeting on November 3rd, because we ran out of time to get through all of our subgroup presentations. Do you want to go to the next slide, Catherine? So here's our agenda. It's the very same one as the previous meeting. And so we'll kick it off with the land acknowledgement.
Hi, everyone. So I actually was just teaching children at Westmore Park today, so maybe I will rely on some of that pieces and parts that I use for the land acknowledgement there. So welcome. I think it's so important to start a meeting like this with intention. And a lot of the work that we do here is all at the heart of it, at the base of it is our connection with the natural world. And it is all an important part of that is this humility that we can offer that allows us to kind of learn from the plants, the trees, all animals, the non-human living world. And that's all knowledge that we get from the indigenous people who lived, called this land home. That is the Sakyog, that is the Tunxis, that is the perhaps the Wangunk and other Algonquian speaking indigenous people. So to them, we say thank you. We offer our gratitude, and let's carry forward that spirit of stewardship as we have this conversation, a part of our past, present, and future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Julia, are you on yet? No, we can move forward. I just forgot, I didn't introduce myself, and since we are live, we should probably introduce ourselves. So that was Kim Hughes, who gave us the lovely land acknowledgement, and I am Catherine Deviney, the energy specialist for the town of West Hartford. So when anyone speaks, maybe we can just state our name.
Catherine, can you hear me?
Who's that?
That's Julia. Can you hear me or no?
Yep. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm logging in right now, but I'm on the phone. So sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, go ahead. You feel free to take it over. I was just kicking it off so that we didn't waste too much time.
No problem. So tonight we're going to try to wrap things up in an hour. I know we did talk about possibly even an hour and a half, but a lot of us have other things that are going on. As we've heard feedback, including Catherine has to jump at 7 o'clock. So what we're going to do tonight, we have 3 more areas to present, and what we're going to do to kind of help make sure that it goes quickly is we're going to leave space for the person who's presenting is going to get all the way through their slide, and then they're going to ask for feedback, and the feedback should be thoughtful, less, we don't want to divert too many times, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But if you guys are okay with it, we were going to allow Catherine's part of the last group of the structure, our number 12. We were thinking of doing that one first. So I was thinking we could go in first order. We have to do 10, 11, 10, or 12, 11, 10, and 9 tonight. And then we'll wrap up and hopefully have some good idea of where we're headed next. Does that work with everybody okay, just to accommodate schedules?
Kim, it works. I mean, Julia, it works fine with me, but when I thought about it, I don't really need to be there since you're going to present kind of what we discussed. It might make sense to do that last once we've kind of heard from some of the other people. So I'm happy to not go first and be able to listen to some of the other ones in order.
Can I make a suggestion? I mean, I just learned from Henry that he has to leave in about 15 minutes, and he probably would do the best job introducing the climate emergency resolution.
Let's go with Henry then. Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Henry, I hope that's okay with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Sorry, I don't mean to jump queue or anything, but yeah, I'll be back, but I have to run and get my son from basketball real quick.
I think that works perfectly. And then one other quick thought, does anyone else have any time restrictions we need to be aware of? Okay, go with Henry, see where we land. And if I recall, this is a group that of myself, Johannes, and Henry. So.
Yeah, so we were working on this one. First off, did I edit the right slideshow? Does everybody, like Julia, do you see the short-term targets as
So Catherine is driving tonight. So Catherine, can you advance to, I think it's number 9? And we will revisit priority 4. Yes, thank you, Dan. Good catch there.
I'm trying to advance it. It's not going. Hang on a second. I don't know why. Shoot.
I have the ability to share. I can.
I'm going to start again and share. It just froze.
That happens. That's life.
I'm going to try again. There we go. We're going to which page?
Slide 20.
priority 9.
Yes, sorry.
All right, good. So I edited the right one because I was lucky to have a little bit more time because that we didn't get to this slide last time because it was a big old mess. So I had a little bit more time to edit it down. Okay, so for the description, we really just wanted to say what we were trying to do to pass a climate emergency resolution and adopt provisions that would help with mitigation and adaptation. Why is this a priority? So I don't know if I got too grand here, but I said climate change is the existential crisis of the 21st century, and just how important it is to all the other issues that we want to make. Not only is it just important for itself, but it's also important to all the other issues that we want to make progress on. And acknowledging that it is a huge problem, and West Hartford needs to collaborate to become a part of the solution. In terms of the specifics, the short-term targets, and this mostly comes out of the actual resolution that we're trying to pass, is first just joining the other towns in Connecticut, other cities and towns in Connecticut that have declared climate change an emergency. That's not, sometimes people confuse that with an emergency, declaring a state of emergency, which has all kinds of, funding implications and everything. So that's not really the same. Just declaring that climate change is an emergency that needs to be worked on really quickly. And we're hoping to do that by the end of the year. We had a meeting with CPED, and we might go into Public Works and then hopefully be in a December commission meeting. But they're also talking about potentially January as well. But hoping to get that done by the end of the year. In terms of what's inside the, kind of the resolution, first is a support of the development of national carbon pricing legislation. Again, that's not a carbon price on the town level, or even the state level, but a wish or a hope for a national carbon price. And more germane to the town, the resolution would form a climate change commission or similar body by either repurposing existing commission or starting a new commission. And it's really important to the team that I'm working with. They're all students, and they see this as a very generational issue that there'll be youth representation on that commission. So that's one of their big stipulations. In terms of what the commission should do, the big 3 things are just 1, to perform a greenhouse gas inventory for the whole town by the end of 2023. And then also to create a climate change plan, but that will get us to net zero emissions by 2050, also by the end of 2023. And then lastly, just to take all the, business that the town has already been doing, and any kind of new business or procedures, and view them through the lens of climate change, to look for places that are easy and cost effective to reduce our carbon footprint.
Thank you very much, Henry. Does anyone have any comments for Henry? What do you guys think about this? You can put things in the chat and we will make sure we highlight and save the chat this time. Okay, I'm flipping through to look at faces. Everyone seems to be in support, or nobody's making any faces.
Yeah, the one question I have, and we can discuss it now, or maybe it comes after the structure presentation, is the Climate Change Commission or similar body. How do we envision that we need a second iteration of the SAG and a Climate Change Commission, or could they be the same group, maybe with a subgroup focused on doing that greenhouse gas inventory? And then my other comment, which came up at the committee meeting as well, I know, is that with student representation, it cannot be a commission, because commissions have to, their membership is actual voting age residents of West Hartford, but the Mayor's Youth Council is a good model that we could use, which does not have that requirement. It also doesn't have party requirements.
So we have considered that a little bit in the Priority 12, which we will present out, but these are good things that Catherine is pointing out for us to consider as a broader group.
Hi, this is Heidi. I have a question that sort of leans into suggestion, and that is that many of the things that are really important to us, I think it makes sense for them to become under the ownership of, either the town manager or the town council, as opposed to having a separate commission so that the implementation becomes the responsibility of those at the highest level instead of delegated to the lower level.
Heidi, you broke up a little bit, but I think you said something about how you wanted to make sure that the things that we care about are embedded in the town. And when you see Priority 12, you will see that as well. And for that reason and that reason alone, if other people have, let's wrap up with Henry, make sure you get all the comments to him. But I do think it probably would be good, Catherine, to jump over to that one real quickly, and we'll circle back together just so you guys can see what we are thinking.
Okay.
I just want to say,
Yep.
Regarding this, and I know we can't really talk too much about this now, is if we can't have youth representatives on this commission, I think we need to propose changes to the town council in the way some of these things operate. I mean, I assume that the rules for commissions are not sit down, written on stone tablets or anything like that. So I think that's fair. I think it's really important, and I really don't like the idea of young people being relegated to this sort of separate thing off over here. And if they're, I mean, it's possible they could be non-voting members, but at least they could be heard in the actual main meetings where other people are sharing views.
Thank you, Christine. We will show you what we're thinking for this future SAG thing too. So be in there as well. Anyone else have comments for Henry on what the climate change group was proposing?
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so that one. So again, I'm sorry, we're going to jump and skip a little bit around here tonight, but because we're getting a lot of questions about it, these are the things that we're starting to think about for the future of the SAG meeting. I did actually think this might turn into a long conversation, so let's start this and then we'll come back to the other ones, and then you guys will see sort of where our head is at. Catherine or Kim, do either of you want to do this? Do you want me to? What do you guys want to do? We have a few slides.
Go ahead.
Okay, so essentially what we're trying to do is solve for some of the things that you guys were just mentioning. There is a desire to make sure that youth have a voice at the table. There's definitely a desire that residents have a voice at the table. There's a desire that staff and commissions possibly be tapped into some sort of future iteration of this, because in order to be successful at the town level, we do think sustainability is a topic that is important for several different stakeholders to invest their time and effort into coming up with cohesive problem solving. So for this slide, we just roughly sketched out, you know, we'll have a priority slide, we'll figure it out. We're going to have to concisely bring this all together. But let's go back to the next, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, so let me just chime in with Julia. So keep in mind, this is a total work in progress.
Yes, this is just an initial draft. Remember, these were draft ideas. Not priority 11. Can you go back to priority 12? And then the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. So don't get overwhelmed by this. This is just a general concept. It is not exactly everything under the sun. The idea here is that, Catherine, you were making a very weird face. No, it's fine. The idea here would be that some future iteration of what we've got today should be proposed as more of a permanent fixture. Now, we don't know if it's going to be a council or if it's going to be a commission. We want to understand exactly what a council is versus a commission, and we don't have that clarity yet. So we need to do a little bit more research to figure out if there's some sort of like hierarchy that says a commission is more or isn't more powerful or whatever. We're gonna have to figure out what's going on there, but we do want to be able to have access to thinking through how we would unite all of those different voices and bring a different setup. So there is an idea that we would have a sustainability person potentially embedded within the town, so that it is an actual staff person with a title that has to do with the sustainability related thing. Perhaps it's an environmental planner even, but this person needs to have a sustainability background, and that person would report to the town manager. And that would be, by the way, we have another slide to show you kind of why we've thought this one through. And then this commission or council would be made up of representatives from different commissions, would have to send at least one representative. We would have town staff on there, and we would have like a community section of different community representatives and student and youth. So again, this isn't a perfect representation of it. We have to think it through, but it was an initial sketch of the idea that we would find a way to combine a place for us to all continue this conversation. The main responsibility would be to create a actual sustainability action plan. And it would also be the place where sustainable CT would live going forward. And it would also potentially be a place where, there's a sustainability cross-check of all projects have to be looked at through this lens. And rather than duplicate efforts and create a separate climate change commission or a separate climate change council, we thought perhaps that the folks that were on this council might overlap and have a subcommittee that's really strong. And again, we'll find a way to make it so that the youth can participate. So I'll give you a couple seconds.
Can I just, I'll just jump in that I think we are leaning away from the idea of a commission and more to the model of a council or a team or a committee or a task force. You can pick whatever word you want. I did meet with our corporation council today and walked through a whole bunch of stuff about commissions and things so that I could educate myself. A commission, as the rules are written, Christine, yes, and I think they could rewrite the rules, but a commission is one model which has balanced party affiliation, and it is made up of electors of the town of West Hartford, people who can vote. Another tool in the toolbox is another animal. It could be a council, it can be named whatever you want, but it's something that is created for a specific purpose and you define what that purpose is, you define the length of that. And for example, it can be renewed. So if you create an action plan and you say, we're going to do the first 5 things on this action plan, and then we're going to renew this committee, maybe refresh its membership, maybe move down the priority list, then that council or task force or whatever can keep going. And the nice thing about a council or a task force or whatever, its representation, its membership is wide open. So there are no party affiliation requirements. Students can be equal members. Organizations, so nonprofits and other groups can be members. Groups cannot be official members of commissions. Again, commissions are electors of West Hartford. So I learned a whole bunch of this stuff today, which is why, as Julia's presenting, I have a little bit more information that I think we want to push the next iteration of the SAG more into this kind of rolling council or committee model.
Fair. And then just to give you extra context of the thought that was put into this, can you go to the next slide? So Catherine put a lot of effort into helping us understand what the gaps are that currently exist, what commissions are permanent, what sort of limitations that they have. In the red, you'll see some ideas of like the gaps that currently exist. So where she's identified, do they have a staff liaison? Is there a rotating staff? Asking some really solid questions. So Catherine did this nice analysis that she shared with Kim and I about like where are there staff that are aligned with the sustainable CT? Where are the ones that are aligned with the current commissions? And there was a highlight that, again, there's this need for some extra staff, possibly a climate change emergency task force or a sustainable West Hartford committee or team. So the things in the pink boxes are the ones that we were trying to think about for the first slide. That's the things that are most relevant to us, but we also want to give these recommendations to town council, because we do think it's going to be necessary for them to sort of rethink how they're set up. And then on the next slide,
just can we stay for 1 second?
yes.
Go back 1 second. So also in my conversation with our legal department today, it was a really invigorating learning exercise for me. It feels like that we're at a good point in time with a council change. And because after my meeting today, I realized that, and she agreed that there are several commissions out there. There are several commissions with vacancies. There are several commissions with commissioners whose terms are ending soon. And in fact, what I learned today was commissions should be by ordinance. We have 2 commissions, the Clean Energy Commission and the Bike Ped Commission. And I think each of those commissions could use a kind of scope rewrite that were mistakenly created by resolution. So Corporation Council was like, oh, we need to fix that. And I said, great, this is the time to do it. So I think the time is right, not only with a new council, with some commissioners' terms ending, but the fact that we need to fix the fact that a few of our commissions are not in the ordinances. And a few of our commissions that are in ordinances, like Conservation and Environment, have not been changed since 1972, we looked at today. So, so the time is right to kind of rewrite what the scope and the representation of those committees, of those commissions, excuse me, look like. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I will say that is technically outside the scope of what they asked us to do for this particular project, but I do think it's worth us sharing like our thoughts that, hey, this is what we'd recommend. We think it's ripe time for, we're under the impression that you guys are going to be reviewing this and we think it's a good idea. On the next slide, Catherine also put together just this idea that in order to increase the chances that a sustainability or climate commission or council or whatever we're calling it, task force, whatever it is, the permanent version of whatever exists beyond this initial group, the town may also want to consider restructuring its departments to match what we're calling the 3 E's, which is it's a term that Matt Hart has adopted. It's basically covered sustainability, like equity, environment, and economy. And right now, Catherine made this really fantastic observation, and that she created this chart to show that the town manager already has 2 of the things that are formally reporting to him. So he has the Office of Economic Development, which is economy, and we have a staff person there. We will have an equity officer soon. So he has the Office of Equity, and he has also the Office of Community Engagement, which is currently called the Office of Public Relations, but we were going to make a recommendation to be broaden out and be more about community engagement. And we have a staff person there. What we don't have is an Office of the Environment, or an Office of Sustainability and Climate Change and Resilience, or an Office of Environmental Planning. So something has to go in there, but he's missing the environment piece, and that very well could fit under his purview very easily and align with the overall structure. So we are going to recommend that they think about this as well, even though our real recommendation that we're going to have to lean heavy into is the future of this particular group. The rest of this is sort of like, we think, this is what we've observed. Hey, just take it for what it's worth, because as residents, we're not really in a position to tell the town how they should structure themselves, but we certainly can try. So we thought we would kind of come up with some version of this to explain that we really need we need a mechanism and a dedicated staff person to make sure that that is going to ensure that the town continues to work on the topics in sustainable CT, that residents know where they're supposed to go when they have these kinds of questions. Several of you have, on the last several weeks, shared with us the projects you've personally ushered and the challenges you've had with working through the town, because there's just no one assigned to work with us. So these are observations we were hoping to share with the new town council that will be sworn in December. And that is the end of our current presentation. I know Catherine has to jump off, but we were going to give about 10 more reactions to this, or 5 more minutes, whatever you guys want to take. What do you think about us presenting all of these ideas to them and saying, listen, we won't be able to succeed as a sustainability group if we don't have buy-in from all these different folks. If we don't embrace the idea that maybe if you guys are restructuring, hey, here's some ideas. And we also think we need an official staff liaison. Those would be our recommendations.
And just in the interest of transparency, that person is not me. I have no desire to be that person. Just in the interest of transparency.
And I just wanted to add one thing, and that is, we talked about it yesterday, but some like tether, some connections, some explicit mention of the connection to West Hartford Public Schools, like school, Board of Ed, whatever. So that's not in here yet, but should be and will be, I think.
Yeah, we forgot that. Thank you, Kim.
So what do you guys think?
I think this looks really great, and I agree with if we can get student representation on there to hear their voice, because frankly they're the ones that are going to have to clean up the mess that we're all making right now. So
Catherine, can you go back just a couple of slides, just so everyone can sort of see this again? And in here, Kim, we could certainly put a school board thing. Sorry, I forgot to put it as like this. Thank you, Ed. Any others? Remember draft.
I think it's a really good thing to propose. I don't guess we know how they might react, but it seems like it's well positioned to get them moving on something. And then we just don't know for sure what it will look like, but we hope it would be close to what is being proposed, because it needs to accomplish certain things.
This is Rachel Virgin.
Mm-hmm.
As we look at this slide at the bottom left, the clean energy, the conservation and environment, and the ped and bicycle. I mean, those are huge pillars of sort of the broader umbrella of sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
But while we're dreaming about reorganizing our town government,
mm-hmm.
I wonder if we should look at that well and realize that those are sort of limiting. And I wonder if that's an area to look to broaden those a little bit. So instead of like that really narrow, again, we're dreaming, but the pedestrian and bicycle, just more complete streets, or I don't know, maybe that's the spot to kind of broaden those and help those include more of the holistic package of sustainability.
I think that that is a really great observation, and we could certainly make some recommendations along those lines. I'm just trying to be cognizant of the fact when we go to town council, we're like, hey, we want you to redo everything. So what's within our scope? Yeah, we certainly can and will make a recommendation. Ed, to your point about sustainable transportation, this was part of the analysis. Catherine shared with us several thoughts she had with this that she had been putting a lot of effort into over the last several, well, probably months and years, to be honest. But we had discussed at length, and we just didn't have time to share everything with you guys tonight. But there was an idea that the pedestrian and bike council might expand to sustainable transportation, or expand to the complete streets commission, or do something to that effect. So yes, I think it would be fair game for us to say, hey, we think some of these commissions also need to be rethought. But what we're recommending is a council that's kind of like a super council that really combines different perspectives. And these are just examples of commissions, just because I didn't have time to put all the ones in there. But we believe housing deserves to be on there, art deserves to be on there, school board deserves to be. We need all the commissions, the disability, the folks that work on that. Like, these all need to be incorporated. Otherwise, we're gonna miss out on true sustainability for the town.
I think I'm not sure if I missed this, or I think, and I'm not sure if this is the time to be talking about all of this. So I'm not sure.
What's the comment?
I guess I just wonder if there's like too many commissions. I feel like when we started this entire process way back when, part of what we talked about was not wanting to silo things so much. And even I'm sitting here getting overwhelmed by all of these commissions that we're talking about. And yeah, I guess that this is always a tension, but a lot of these things typically fall underneath a planning commission, and then the planning commission has like other things. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just worry that we're having a lot of great ideas for ways to address things, but it seems that we're also creating more silos.
I wanted to, Julia, if you don't mind, I'd like to tag on to what Mary's saying right now with a real world example that I experienced recently. I've been attending the Pedestrian and Bicycle Commission meetings for the last several rounds, and one of the things that's come up as a really interesting side conversation there is the role of the commission as an advisory body to the town council and to town staff has a lot of limitations for people who would like to be strong advocates. So, for example, a number of the commissioners came from, a place of being strong, advocates for active transportation and complete streets and many of the concepts that we're supporting here, but are really unable to formally advocate in their roles as commission members. And so, Mary, I really hear you about what we're doing in terms of sort of siloing or directing creative energy into a commission or town council format, because I think a lot of times some of the best advocacy happens outside formal organizations. And so, I don't want to like go off into the weeds with a big organizational conversation, but I just want you all to know that I think that this kind of a conversation is happening outside our group in some of these commissions and councils that report to town staff and town council, and it's a really worthwhile conversation.
Very duly noted. Thank you. Any other comments?
I think the flip side of that might be that there's so much work to be done that if you get it all funnel it all in, too much of it into one larger umbrella, it would really be hard to accomplish. I mean, I attend the Clean Energy Commission meetings, and they're very busy. And I'm not sure what would happen if all of that went into a planning commission or a larger grouping. I mean, it could be tried, but it could be challenging.
So that's also
Yeah.
my observation. Other.
Yeah, Johannes here. Yeah, I'm on the fence here. Jay, I hear you, but I also hear Christine. And I was for a while part of the Pedestrian Bicycle Commission too. And at times there is the kind of the nitty-gritty work that needs to be done. And that happens in the small by just a few people. The surveys that need to be done, the kind of underground work. And if you just have one or several larger commissions or committees or councils, I worry that that nitty-gritty kind of work does not get the proper attention. And that's why I would favor having smaller commissions or councils, but ensuring that they are in very good communication. I think that is currently the problem. There is not sufficient communication. With regard to pedestrian bicycle, I couldn't agree more to broaden that scope to complete streets, or I think, Ed, you wrote in the chat, sustainable transportation. I mean, that would make more sense.
I agree. And I think maybe not restricting commissions too much. Like, don't put commissions in a straitjacket. Like, you can deal with this, but you can't deal with that. Let them broaden and take it to a subcommittee of town council or whatever. And if it needs to be sorted out at some point, like, oh, well, actually that's being dealt with over in conservation and environment. Well, that's fine, but I think that would be preferable to somehow not ever getting brought up at all because it doesn't seem to belong somewhere.
So, I hear what you guys are all saying, and I feel like there's a subgroup of people who have had direct experience with the commissions themselves and may have an opinion about how they could or couldn't be reshaped. I personally think that's a little bit outside of the scope of what we've been asked to do. And if there's a few of you guys that want to take that offline and then we want to like throw it in as like an appendix part to this, or like some of us are really passionate, have had direct experience with these commissions. Hey, while you guys are rethinking how town council set up, maybe you want to take some of these other advice things too. I want to keep it really strict to like, what is the future of this particular group? And I do think that what we are hearing, we know for sure, people want a permanent version where they can go and share their opinions back to the town, and that the town will be able to actually take those action steps necessary and get, we can have a direct feedback mechanism. That would require access to staff. We were thinking of a version that didn't have any commissions on it, but then you don't acknowledge the fact that there are commissions that have responsibility over some of these areas. For all the reasons we were just saying, commissions are very territorial over their jurisdiction, so we haven't been able to really break that down. But I've also heard that town council is rethinking some of the other rules. So if they're in a re-envisioning section, we can toss some things out there, but the scope of this is, do we want this to continue or not? And so I guess just as a real quick poll, so we can move back to the other ones, do you guys feel comfortable with us making a recommendation at all that we have a permanent something, whether it's a council, a task force, something? Are you guys cool with that? How do you feel about that?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
What I will commit to doing is we need to keep massaging this. Obviously, this has a long way to go. But I do think that it will be really important to be very clear on what the scope of this work group is, because I agree it could get really unwieldy if it's too large, but it needs to be acknowledged that like sustainability is pervasive and it's got to cross a bunch of different things. So we'll bring you another iteration that has a more thought to the scope. We'll take the feedback we got tonight, see if we can massage some of this. And for those of you who are interested in working on something else, that would really be the next two slides, sort of Catherine's passion project. Maybe we can set up another like side group that talks about like, here's the direct experiences we've had or the struggles we've had with dealing with the town directly from other commissions that we've had. We think it's time that these things get broken down. And the reason we thought about it is because the thing we're working on crosses all of these people and we're having these barriers. So you want to be part of that side conversation, send me an email. I mean, I might not be on it, but send me an email. We'll find a way to coordinate.
Do we want to recommend, in addition to the pieces that we've been saying, that sustainability become a priority that is adopted by the council, so that so that there is commitment there?
Heidi, that's a really great suggestion. Did you say that? I'm sorry, your phone keeps breaking up. So I heard that you're recommending that we make a recommendation to town council that they make a statement that sustainability is important to the town.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes. And that yeah, that is what. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. So that it becomes their priority.
So
and
in order to go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in order to create one of these commissions or councils, there needs to be a official ordinance written, and in the ordinance we would have that declaration or something to that effect. So yeah, we could put all that rationale and reasoning in there. They have to pass an ordinance to make something like this.
Yeah, I wonder if even before the ordinance that creates the commission is put into place, that the priority be established and adopted.
We can certainly make a recommendation. Are you guys interested in more conversation on this, or can we move back to the other topics and we'll do the game plan of like revisiting this? And those of you who want to do the commission thing can email me separately and we'll do something separate on the side.
Let's move on.
Thank you. Okay, great. All right, so where we left off was number 10. If you can go back, Catherine.
Yep.
Thank you guys for this, by the way. All right, number 10, circular economy. Dan, were you presenting this one? Catherine, who else?
It was going to be Jonathan Humphreys. Is he on the call?
That's a good question. Jonathan, are you on with us? I'm looking. I don't see Jonathan. Catherine, do you want to present it?
Well, or would Mary like to? I mean, I can. I'm not as familiar with this one as I was with the food waste and
Sure.
Yeah.
I am also not familiar with this one, and I was going to talk about, I think we're returning to number 4, the transportation, and I was going to talk about that one.
We are returning to number 4. I could present this one if you guys want, because we did a brainstorming on this one instead. Okay, I'm sorry, you're hearing me talk a lot. Okay, so essentially that was the idea. We'll go quickly through this. The idea that we want to become a place that embraces and acknowledges the idea of a circular economy, which is this conceptual idea that we don't want to take waste economy anymore. We want to really be thinking about thinking in cycles, and you want to be thinking about how one feedstock can start another, and you could do that through both the product level, but you could also do it from a business perspective. And so the idea here was that it would be an interesting business angle to start positioning West Hartford as a town that understands and is invested in the circular economy. We send a lot of valuable resources to landfills. There's limits to what supply chains can provide, and there's limits to what the economic system is designed to optimize. We're trying to mimic natural cycles as best as possible. And so from a short-term perspective, there's this concept of sharing sheds or fix-it locations that have started popping up across Europe and in other towns. Sharing shed is like the idea that it's like a lending library, but for things that are not books, right? So if you have a lawnmower, an electric lawnmower, and you don't want to, you don't use it all the time, but your neighbor might want to borrow it from you, you could put it in a place where you can basically sign out a lawnmower or something to that effect. Or if you need a drill, or if you need a ladder, or if you need something to that effect. I mean, I'm naming things that might have liability associated with them, but you get the idea that that there are ways for people to kind of come together and share resources versus having to always go out and buy your own and own things. There was also this idea that we had that perhaps there could be a pilot program for companies whose waste can be used as a feedstock for other local businesses, match these companies and reward them. So for instance, those folks who are interested in composting and food waste, you can create a virtuous cycle of, for folks who have used cooking oil, sometimes there's companies that are willing to come pick up used cooking oil because they are the feedstock to something else. You guys are getting the idea. There was an idea, maybe there's a tax incentive program for local businesses that are part of a circular economy. That wouldn't be very hard for West Hartford to pass because they don't like to give tax breaks to anybody. And then to really tap into what other plans are emerging from other towns. Towns and cities have around the world have started to adopt what are called circular economy plans. And so I just pulled this directory out and said, you know, we could take a look at what other cities are doing and how they're adopting this. And perhaps there are some that fit really nicely into what West Hartford might want associated with our goals. And then we would share that out with the town. And then we have some long-term targets, tool sheds, again, using existing businesses to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce. And so once you start this virtual cycle, there could be businesses that want to be based here because they know they're going to have access to certain things they won't have access to in other towns. That's this one.
Julia, a quick question.
Yeah.
Did your group talk at all about the possibility of local currency, like the Berkshires in the Berkshires, other towns have it,
No.
so that money stays in town longer? That is not necessarily inherent to a circular economy, but it makes money stay within your community longer. And there are lots of communities in the States and abroad that are playing with that successfully.
We did not, and I wrote it in the notes, and I will make sure we think about it. Thank you so much, Johannes. Anything else?
Joy, it almost seems like you could have the target, a target for the town in the next year or sooner, pick out some things that are in this directory and identify 10 things that they could, or 6 things that West Hartford could do in the short term, and then another 6 or 8 things that West Hartford could do in the long term. Still, what I'm seeing is it seems like other towns have already done a lot of the hard work here, and maybe just build on that and not try to reinvent the wheel or spend a lot of time. But if there are enough things that have been done, then pick in the short term, pick the low hanging fruit. Like, yes, this looks doable in West Hartford. Some of them might not be, just might not seem to be a fit. But here are some things that we could really do pretty quickly, and or initiate pretty quickly. And here are some other things that look doable in West Hartford that just would need a longer timeline.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. So we were thinking of doing, and the sharing sheds are one of those ideas, and pilot programs are some of those ideas. So yes, we would definitely do that. Great idea.
Julia,
yeah.
It might be, this is Rachel, it might be easy-ish to just suggest that they put a web page on the town website that lists businesses that are already part of this, like Max and Lily's, where I get all my stuff for my kids, or the next chapter, that new used bookstore on Main Street that is looped into the public school kids that need, like there are businesses, and maybe even just an easy thing to do is just highlight those as, really special businesses for our town on the website.
Yep. Perfect. All right, I'm going to shut down my own conversation on this because we've heard from me too much. So let's go back to priority, one more, priority 11. Go back to priority 4, and then we will be done for tonight.
Yeah, so this is the accessible energy efficiency thing, and I apologize to my group. There's been a little bit of confusion. The other clean energy priority, we felt like this tied in with it really well. So it hasn't been very separate, but I did, which is why I haven't called a meeting for this group. But I did just put some things in here that can maybe get worked with the other one. To me, and it seems like accessible energy efficiency, the biggest difficulty with accessible energy is just the barriers that exist, which are often financial, but are sometimes logistic. And if the town can provide incentives or pragmatic planning, practical, whatever, to help people remove barriers that actually, and to start things. There's some kind of, is it energy aggregation? Julia, help me out here. You probably know that term. It's
energy aggregation.
What's that?
That is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some ways that you can make well, this is actually make clean energy more accessible, but then the efficiency part of it, I think, think about buildings, energy efficiency for buildings of various kinds. That's one of the biggest things, although also energy efficiency for things like transportation is also a big deal. But I think planning and the availability and just the practical access is a big deal. So if the town could provide incentives or low income loans, and that would be a big thing. And then also I have to investigate what other towns are doing. I don't know if you all are aware that the town of Ithaca in New York just set a goal of becoming 100% carbon free, I think, because it's not entirely renewable, but carbon free, I think, by 2030, like this hugely aggressive goal. And they've worked out a whole, they already have a program that will be either have started or starting up soon, that's privately funded and amounts to some virtually 0%, zero interest loans and money for residents and commercial to move to. So that's one of the things. I mean, I was thrilled to see this last week or 10 days ago or whatever, because I feel like, just like with the circular economy, they must have done a lot of work on this already. And maybe we can, for both this accessible energy efficiency and the other clean energy thing, we can learn from some of the things that they're doing, because they already have some of this stuff lined up. So I'm happy for other people to add to this slide, which is still out there. All these slides have been revised and this is still out there. But I do think that incentives and removing barriers are the main things here.
Thank you, Chris. Comments to Chris? Chris, do you think that this one really should be just rolled up into the other one and kind of?
I think it could be rolled up, and I don't know whether we need to rename the other one, which we already have somewhat more elaborated, and bring this into it, or whether this fits well enough into it that we can add this to that. So in the wrapping up and creating the final presentation for the town council, maybe just pull this in, which would have the benefit of then giving us 10 priorities, which was the goal initially, I think, and that we ended up with 11, because I think accessible energy was one of the last to enter as a sort of separate thing. But the more we've talked about it, the more I think it really can get put into that other priority, which is 2.
Well,
oh, thanks, Johannes.
Can I just ask a question and make a comment? Was the thrust of this one the accessibility piece? Because would it work if we had a separate thing that was just focused on accessibility across all? Was that kind of the intent of this? Because I can see in all of our categories that we might benefit from one group of us really thinking through the accessibility piece of that. Maybe that's a way we could morph this into a.
Yeah, I'm actually not entirely sure, but I think the emphasis on this particular one is energy efficiency, which is really important, but it's also kind of narrow. So I do think it can get pulled into the other one, which is renewable, clean and renewable. And because it's such a key part of that, if we're going to get to 100% clean and renewable, there really has to be much, much greater energy efficiency. So I think it actually can get pulled into that, even though energy efficiency is not always, strictly speaking, the same as clean energy, because you know, you have a gas, we have a gas furnace. We want to be more energy efficient, which promotes the transition to clean and renewable because of quantity. You know, we do need to reduce the amount of energy we use in order to have enough in order for the renewable energy to be enough to go around, essentially.
So
I wish Bernie were here. He's much more eloquent on those things than I am.
I think that perhaps there should be a greater conversation about this, whether it like, I like the idea that Rachel was sharing about the accessibility piece. Like maybe there is room for us to think through, just generally speaking, like how do you make some of these things, all these topics, like how do we really think about it from an equity and access lens? Perhaps that is a extra.
Well, you know, that's a really great point, Julia, because when I put that on the slide, I was also really thinking that we have a big gap. We will struggle with helping low and moderate income residents be more energy efficient and transition to clean and renewable energy, because it all takes effort and it logistically is sometimes confusing, and that I see as a real challenge for West Hartford. So I think it actually belongs in both. Maybe it can be components of both the equity part and the clean and renewable.
When we do the conversation, when we finalize whoever's working on the finalizing of the slides, these go right next to each other, and that way it flows from one to the next, and we explain that there's a section about like how do we make this accessible. So I think that's the action step for that group, is to try to figure out how it really flows down from like we'll connect it like sequentially. They'll be in the order that clean energy will go, and then energy efficiency, and we'll have a conversation about accessibility.
Yeah. But
I do think that it is worth. Let's come back. So let's finish number 4, and then let's come back to this idea just as a final thought about if accessibility deserves its own slide, or if we should make sure it's baked into the end of every priority. Does that work for you guys as a solution for that? Their comments? Let's get back to slide 4. Catherine, looks like you had to reshare. You are on mute. Alrighty, 4. All right, Mary, I think you said you were going to take this one.
Yes. So I don't know if we've all just been reading through these, but we want to encourage and expand the use of public transportation within West Hartford and the region. We believe it's an important priority because it can help us reduce air pollution and climate change by encouraging less personal vehicle use, promote economic development and sustainable growth, providing more options for people to travel to and around West Hartford, address mobility and transportation justice concerns among children, the elderly, disabled, and poorer residents who either don't have vehicles or can't get around, in places that are too vehicle dependent, and promote community connections with density and shared transportation. We did have some short-term targets. A lot of these focused on trying to make it easier or more pleasant to use public transportation. So simple things like including directions by transit for all public events that are happening in the town. Mapping, like physically having the town go out and map how many crosswalks and signal crossings, especially prioritized signal crossings, are around transit stops, and developing plans for improvement where necessary. Allowing Link or other e-scooters in town to solve the last mile problems that are associated with public transportation. They currently stop at the Hartford-West Hartford line. And prioritizing municipal snow clearing around transit stops for access. I think anyone who has tried to take the bus in the winter realizes that you have to make a giant jump, which not everyone is able to do. And then the next slides have medium and long term. So medium and long-term targets, upgrading bus stops to include seating, rain and sun protection, maps, schedules, the whole shebang, just again, to make it easier and more enjoyable to use buses. Support dense development along transportation corridors through zoning and incentives. Encourage the state to expand CT Fast Track to serve a wider area, especially going across the river. provide easy connection from West Hartford Center to kind of CT Fast Track or Union stations, whether this is a shuttle or sort of asking the state to expand service. Work with state elected officials to propose legislation allowing private, municipal, or other employers to opt in to the UPass program, which for those of you who don't know, it is a program that universities can opt into right now. And it allows a university to pay a certain amount per person who's there, and then they get a free pass for all public transit in the state. Currently, no one else is allowed to opt into that program, but that is something that has been pushed at the state level in the past, and it would be nice to see it pushed again. And finally, investigating a snow clearing ordinance, either that fines property owners for not clearing their property, so what Hartford does, for example, or puts the town in charge of all snow clearing to facilitate stop access and last mile problems in the winter. Some of these, I think, might be a little bit more complete streets, things like snow clearing in particular, but it is sort of my pet obsession with how difficult it is to use transit in the winter, particularly if you have a stroller, if you have any sort of other mobility aid. And so I did want to put them here.
Thank you so much. Questions or comments on this one? Mary.
I have a quick comment. Sorry to kind of jump in, and if this has maybe been discussed before, but I'm wondering if we should include something about town events and doing shuttles. Maybe is that like an intro into people utilizing the public transit, and would ease some of the parking burden as well for some of those events.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea for things like Celebrate West Hartford. I mean, absolutely. I think that we could definitely put that in the short. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Admittedly,
Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't 100% know what I'm thinking of as far as like what events I'm speaking of specifically, but just like for really popular, if there's like a 5Ks or whatever, or I was thinking Celebrate, or like the holiday stroll, or the Halloween, wait, is it the Halloween stroll? What is that called? Anyway, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think yeah, I think that's great. I'll add that in.
One thought that has always confused me, there's only one like nice art stop in the middle of West Hartford, like that they could make some of these stops for the buses a lot more attractive. And also just supremely confusing, maybe someone can just tell me offline, but why is the one in the middle of West Hartford facing the bank and not the street? Does anyone have any, like, I feel like the bus would miss you half the time. It's so weird. I don't understand why that is reverse, but.
I mean, sometimes they're that way if there's a fear that you're going to get splash from cars, particularly when it's really snowing. I haven't really taken a look at that one to see where it is.
The first time I've ever encountered such a situation. I've been in like probably too many major cities.
I know.
Don't care about people getting splashed.
Maybe the bank paid for it.
Yeah, it's weird. The entire thing is weird. I spent a lot of time looking around at the transit stops saying this is weird, but I'll.
Maybe that was low bid and they installed it backwards.
Well, it's one that's always perplexed me, and every time I walk by it, I'm like, well, it's painted, but it's backwards. It's so weird. What about the idea of, I also love the idea of connecting the some bike paths to some central places. Like it's just really hard sometimes to get like a bike to the top of your car to want to take it places, even out to the reservoir or out to other locations. So,
Julia, I agree with that. And I was actually going to point out the overlap between public transportation, this slide that I think is excellent, and the slide that the Complete Streets group prepared. And I'm wondering if the two could not get together and see to what extent they can merge the two, because you could say, well, why not have, for instance, more bikes on buses, right? And that's currently the case, but can we optimize that? Why not have more bike racks at the fast track stations, right? Why not build more connectivity between those hubs? And so I see that there's quite a bit of overlap between whatever you want to call it, multimodal and public transportation, because let's face it, public transport is an integral part of multimodality. And so I don't know if we really need two separate slides. I think we would benefit from merging them without losing the level of detail that we have.
You can have more than 2 slides. Maybe we'll make these sequential as well, and you guys can figure out if you are closer together.
Can I address a couple of these points here? I work pretty closely with a lot of the folks at DOT, and I'm also familiar with CT Transit. So there are connections that go east of the river. You just have to be in Hartford. So it would require a transfer basically. So I know that there's the 913, which goes to stores. There's the 80 buses, which go, across the river to East Hartford and Manchester. So depending on where you're going, you have options there. It's just getting there from West Hartford. You'd have to go down, you'd have to go down Farmington or go down Fast Track to go into Hartford to make that connection. There is a connection from West Hartford Center to CT Fast Track, which is the 153, but the service schedule on that makes it difficult because my understanding is it's an hourly service. So that actually goes from Flatbush up through West Hartford Center, down Main Street, ends in Copaco, if anybody's familiar with the shopping center up in Bloomfield. So if we had additional service on that to connect with Fast Track, that would be great. I'm 100% behind the snow clearing ordinance. That is, it's really a danger. It's really a danger. If you're talking December, January, there's snow piled up on the bus stop. People are waiting, in the street for the bus to come by, and it's just, that is something that, if we can get the town to pass a snow clearing ordinance, that would be really great.
Actually, West Hartford has a snow clearing ordinance. It's just not enforced.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So
yeah, so Hartford stepped up their fines last year, and that led to a dramatic shift in the people actually clearing their snow. But the other one that I included, places like Kalamazoo and Syracuse, the town itself does it, and so the sidewalks get plowed first.
Oh wow, that's really great.
And then it's done fast because they have their own town-owned things. They just go right down and do it.
And my understanding was that, in regards to your UPass program, was that there, so that the law was that the DOT was not allowed, or basically the DOT commissioner was not allowed to go into an agreement with a private entity. And
Right.
as of the last session, that has been rectified. But I'm not fully versed in that new legislation, but I expect an update on that soon. And we can connect offline if you're interested.
This is Rachel Virgin, just super fast. Also to keep in mind with the last mile, some of just the pedestrian issues in town, like all the time I'm walking from the intersection of Park and Troutbrook along the Troutbrook Trail down by the river, and there's like that really steep hill, and the fence has been broken for like 2 years, and then there's graffiti under the bridge, and then there's there's just like, and then there's no lights under that bridge, so it's like can't really go there if it's not, you know what I mean? There's pedestrian, just straight up pedestrian safety stuff that really, I'm like, town of West Hartford, like we need to just make sure we cover up the graffiti and like fix the fences and clear the trash and stuff like that.
I think you guys are bringing up some really important topics. There's obviously, a lot about what you've experienced as a resident. So I know in these slides we've asked to put together like what was the reasoning, but perhaps there should be an appendix that's filled with like observations of why we've done this, and that, to your point, Rachel, you just shared like this is broken here, this sidewalk's creating this problem, this safety issue is emerging, and we have transfer issues. We have, you know, like what you're saying with like the bus requires this much time. It takes so much effort. You know, Mary, the snow creates a hazard and an issue for, like, maybe there is room for us at the very end of this, not to present to town council, but as like a background reader for reference. Like, we're residents and we've experienced this firsthand. We know this creates difficulties. This is part of what led to our recommendations. I don't know. Do you guys want to do something to that effect where you can share like the things you've learned or seen or experienced?
Wasn't one of the recommendations to create like a 311 or some mechanism for reporting this stuff? And
That was under, yeah, the complete streets. Mm-hmm.
There is a 311 system, but is it not available to be used for that? The town does have a 311 system.
Oh.
It's on, there's a link directly on the Public Works website on the town. I have heard from people that it's pretty, it's not very intuitive to get registered with it so that you can make a comment or an issue. And I'm not sure how widely they advertise it, but there is a 311 system on the Public Works website.
This is bringing up the thread between what Ed's observations were and Catherine, what you're sharing and everybody else is sharing, which is this lack of communication that's just consistent. I think that's another observation we need to share with them. It's just like, we know that there are things out there. You have to dig so hard sometimes to find what you need, and it's just really, really difficult. So I don't know, maybe it is worth us reiterating that point too.
Yeah, so one other comment, and I don't know whether this fits under a priority or maybe under the structural or an overview thing. One suggestion would be for the town to organize a community conversation around sustainability. They've been doing these kind of public community conversations around public safety, policing, and various issues. And maybe they should just open it up, you know, through the library or something, where Matt Hart and various town officials listen to a community conversation about sustainability from their public.
I was actually curious how anyone felt about, so I believe in West Hartford, the people who sort of control transportation, I know that whenever I've complained, I've been told to go talk to the police chief. Is that still the case?
So
has that changed?
This is a gap as far as I'm concerned, that there is no champion for public transportation in the town, and they need to designate someone. I didn't see your first slide, Mary. I joined in, so I didn't see the short term. Was there another slide before this?
There was, but that wasn't on it because I couldn't remember. I mean, I know that I personally have not felt comfortable raising issues by being told to go to the police chief, and so I've just dropped them. And I, honestly, I can't be the only person who does that. So I didn't know if that could be part of the target as well.
When I first started the Sustainable Connecticut program back in the first round in 2018, and again, there were lots of actions around public transportation. And I was digging around for who is the public transportation champion in town, because I didn't know. And I couldn't find anyone. So I put in the chat there that the town needs to designate someone, and they should designate a Connecticut Rides liaison for the town. I called Connecticut Rides up several months ago when we were doing the Sustainable Connecticut application, because working with them was one of the actions, and I said, maybe this is easy to do. They had on their books that our rep was Ron Van Winkle, who has been retired for many years. Was the former town manager. So there's no one working with them. Yeah, I put it in the chat already, Julia. So I think yes, first we need someone to take responsibility for this. But I think, again, I agree with Johannes that this could be something more comprehensive in terms of complete streets. And I don't know whether Julia, in terms of the structural thing, I would like to see bike ped expand beyond bike ped into public transport and into complete streets.
Yes, we discussed that.
Yeah.
So
Could I make a recommendation under the public transport too? Is that currently there is no stop on the Hartford line in West Hartford, although my understanding is that the Flatbush Avenue stop at CT Fast Track could be a stop, basically. So you could have a multimodal sort of stop there. You could take the train and get off at Flatbush. Would it be possible? And I don't know if the town has, supported, telling DOT to build a station at the Flatbush Avenue stop.
So Dan and I talked about that a bit, and we decided to not include it simply because we recognize that ridership between Hartford and New Haven declines with every additional, can decline if the time it takes is added, and each stop adds significant time to that trip. So we talked about it and didn't include it. I mean, obviously this is a large group, and so if everyone else wants it in there, we could add it in. But we thought that West Hartford is so close to Union Station as it is, and that the sort of trade-off of the amount of money that it would cost to build it versus what that money could do for service improvements and the sort of time it would add to that trip made it sort of not the best decision. But if everyone else wants it to be there, then we can add it in.
Mary, I think that's a really great observation, and I'm really glad that you guys considered that, because that's important, that we're looking at the bigger picture, that it's not just about, the ease of public transportations or our needs for sustainability for the town, but specifically like that we're in this as a team with Connecticut and a bigger picture. So thanks for considering that.
A quick tip for the very near term, as in this winter, if you call, I think you do have to call the police, but if you call the town and report snow not being cleared on someone's property where there's well, really anywhere, but if there is a bus stop, they will cite that resident. So I know that has been done. If people who are using bus stops want to take that on, people on this committee or someone want to take that on and try to get that remediated somewhat over this winter for the purpose of helping those people who are taking the bus. You can do that. It's not a long-term fix, but it could be a good neighbor thing to do.
thank you for that suggestion, Chris. And I see Catherine also wrote that the town needs more planning staff. We'll write that in there as well. We have 9 minutes left. Do we miss any priorities? Do we get to everybody at this point? I think we covered them all. Mary, it sounds like you're open, you and possibly others in the team would be open to talking with the folks working on Complete Streets. Again, we can put them sequentially right next to each other in the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good idea to just rethink all of them as multimodal transit or something like that.
Okay, so with 8 minutes left, and I have a hard stop, I'm actually started 30 minutes ago, so whoops. So what I did say that we wanted to do just real quickly was to revisit.
I think that's Ted. I'm trying to mute him. There we go. Got him.
So the last thing we wanted to circle back on was, should we have a slide that talks about, or should we make sure everyone is incorporating in the concept of accessibility? Is it its own thing, or do we want to make sure that it's baked into each of these? I mean, I'm in favor of baking them into all of them, but I don't want to, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, accessibility though, that's kind of the equity, right? I mean, in that we do have a slide that I think that touches on equity, or do we? I don't know. Is that one of the groups?
Racism thing, and then we have. Why don't we flip through them really quickly?
But yeah, I mean, to me, access is equity and inclusion, and So, and yes, I agree that it should be, that should be a part of every slide, not something separate.
Yeah, we don't really have it called out. So I was thinking through everyone's recommendations that there have been conversations about people in different income classes, and there have been some thought given, but perhaps that could just be a challenge we give to ourselves one more time. Take a look at your short-term and long-term things, see if there's a way for you to incorporate accessibility and access into your recommendations if you haven't already. Does that feel like a decent solution? We can entertain more conversation on this. Go for it.
Well, and I'll just say, Chris and Maura and I worked on the anti-racism one, and I think we could retitle that one equity, because I do agree with Kim. We were at the kind of very rough draft edge of our slides compared to some of the other people. But most of the conversation that Chris and Maura and I had were around kind of the broader topic of equity.
And I don't recall the exact way we talked about this back in August or whenever it was that we were doing the visioning, but I can't imagine that anyone would be opposed to having that be broadened, that because it would include anti-racism and that sort of thing, but also be broader.
Well, I'm not sure that equity actually includes anti-racism. Well, I think anti-racism is a higher bar because it's about being proactively, it's about proactively breaking down systems that are racist, as opposed to opening up systems to give greater or more equitable access.
Yeah, so I would just say that like anti-racist actions are going to be essential to delivering equity on all of these points. So definitely calling out, you know, the need to be explicitly anti-racist. I think that totally makes sense, but could still be a part of, you know, an overall headline of equity, maybe equity and anti-racist actions. And I'm guessing, I don't know how Sustainable Connecticut breaks it out, but I maybe would follow some of their verbiage. Apps.
I mean, if we're talking,
Mary, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we're talking about, you know, the language aspect of it, I mean, access is essentially anti-ableism as well. And so I wanted sort of that approach. You know, I sort of included the sanitized version as like mobility justice. But I mean, there's sort of lots of ways. I mean, I think that I was definitely thinking about this as I think Rachel was talking about, you know, walking with where places there's no lighting, and sort of other people talked about, you know, walking with children. I mean, there's certainly also a sort of anti-sexist approach to the city that, or the town, that we could take. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of sort of thinking about it, not just as equity as being more proactive, that anti-racist slide could be expanded. If you wanted to go there.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add a little bit to that, it's just about uplifting marginalized communities and voices. I think that's, and that to me, it's all part of, you know, essential part of that same thing.
Well, my thoughts are on it that anti-racism is different than equity. Equity can very much be tied to ableism, other opportunity advancement, but also it, to me, it signifies low income versus middle income versus, you know, high income. And I feel like in some of these things that the town is able to deal with, for the energy efficiency specifically, that seems to be very skewed toward how to get low income families access to what they need. And that to me is not the same as us intentionally trying to be an anti-racist town. So I do think anti-racism should stand alone personally. but this is not my show. So if
You're, I'm
We
with
can
you there.
continue the conversation though. I mean, because I think it's important to use some of the, language that everyone is using. Again, I'm definitely not downplaying the importance of being explicitly anti-racist, but that is a part of, like, what is the title of the person who we are adding, Catherine and Julia? It's
equity officer.
An equity officer. And I think that is,
I do not know if that's the title. That's the title I've been using. Again, I have not seen the posting yet. I keep checking the town's website to see if it's posted.
So for example, like Rosina Haskins, I think her department with the West Hartford Public Schools is at the Office of Equity Advancement. I know that they participate in very much in anti-racist actions to support our schools and our community. So, I mean, so my 2 cents.
Lily? Others?
We can take, as a group, and Heidi, feel free to join if you like. We can take another stab at revising that slide to try and address, and they don't have to be, they can be separate, but on the same slide, and try and work both angles.
I'm happy to join. I was out of town when you were working on it before, but I am here now, and so count me in.
Okay, well, it is 8 o'clock, and everybody should have an action step to go and revise based on the comments that you've received over the last few weeks and as of tonight. Our next meeting was tentatively scheduled for December 3rd. That was what the regular schedule was, or December 1st. That first Wednesday in December is the one. I think it's December
1st.
Okay. That was what we had said what our next meeting would be, was December 1st. So between now and then it's Thanksgiving. So I guess what I would recommend is see if you can absorb what's being said, make some edits to some of these slides. We'll try to go through them again in that session and go through them now a little faster since we've all gotten familiar with the general idea. But we will also take a offline conversation to talk about those who really want to think about other recommendations to the town about structure. So Catherine, after you left, what we had decided was there's a lot of good conversation and opinions about commission and observations about how maybe things could be restructured. And we will make a recommendation for this SAG, but then we'll also have like an appendix section that makes a recommendation on what else the town could do, but we're going to take that offline for those who are interested. And right now,
so are we scheduling an additional meeting to have that conversation?
Who's interested in that? And yeah, we would probably have an additional meeting.
And just so you guys are aware, I continue my conversations around structure with different departments and the town manager. It's like an ongoing discussion that I'm because the more input I get, I feel like the better the thought process is.
So I just copied all of our notes into the first slide. So that is recorded at this time, even if the glitchy WebEx decides to shut us down. And I just want to thank everybody for their time to complete this review. We're getting closer. I think we might need a little bit more time. Maybe this is a February presentation. We got to figure out also how we're going to get on the agenda. But look forward to meeting with you guys in a couple of weeks. Does anyone have any other final thoughts or concerns or questions?
I have one thought, and it goes along with maybe pushing this presentation out. Not that I want to do that, but once we have these slides, I guess I would say, throw it out there, think about whether each group might want to sit down with the department director or the relevant staff that we know of right now in that area and kind of go over it with them directly with them before we go into town council with something. Because I mean, so I guess I would say, think about if we wanted to do that extra level of due diligence. And the beginning of these SAG meetings, I said, you can meet with or request audience with whomever you want. I'm happy to arrange that for you, or you can arrange it directly. But it might be nice to take these couple of slides and actually sit down with the department director or Matt Hart or whomever to get their input as well.
That could be helpful. Like you're getting a little bit of support in the chat. Ed and Kim speak for everybody or me. But absolutely. Great idea, Catherine. All right. So to those of you who have been dedicated to this, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and thanks for the patience of going through this exercise. We are getting some really, really good ideas out there for the town. So it's going to be really great. Even if they do 5 of the things we recommend, think about it. That's 5 more things than they never did before. So we're all going to work on moving the town forward. Okay.
Hey, we need 300 points to catch up to Greenwich.
That's
if we're
what we
going to be number 1. That's what I'm looking at.
Basically start by saying, listen, Greenwich is at 1,000 points. We only had 700. We're trying to show you how you can get 100 points.
The holy
We
grail.
need to catch up with them.
You all laugh about that, but I suggested to a family member who is from Greenwich that West Hartford and Greenwich should have a friendly competition about these things. So
that would be fun.
Put it in the ideas for what we need to do. Compete with other towns. Okay. Anyway, I gotta go. I really am late to another meeting, so we gotta go.
Thanks, Julia.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Bye.